The first $100,000 is the hardest money you will ever make. It is not because the world is unfair. It is not because the government taxes you, and it is not even because your boss is an idiot. It is hard simply because you do not have capital. Without capital, you are just a hamster running in a wheel, all sweat, no leverage. People love to fantasize about compound interest. They read those neat little charts showing how 10% a year turns you into a millionaire. But they forget one inconvenient fact. Compound interest is useless if you don't have anything to compound. That is the cruel joke. Everyone wants the snowball effect, but nobody wants to push the damn snowball up the hill in the first place. When I was young, I wasn't dreaming about billions. I was wondering how the hell I could scrape together my first few thousand. Rent, kids, divorce, it all comes at you. Nobody hands you a cushion. You think rich people are playing the same game as you, but they aren't. They already have chips on the table. You are still trying to buy in. The reason the first $100,000 is a war is simple. You are working with muscle, not money. Every dollar is your sweat. Every step feels uphill. You save $500, and then the car breaks down. You stash away $1,000, and then your kid needs braces. The world conspires to remind you that being poor is expensive. But here's the paradox. The moment you cross that invisible line of $100,000, you feel the shift. The money starts pulling its own weight. A 10% return suddenly looks like something real. 10 grand on $100,000 is very different from 50 bucks on $500. People think I exaggerate when I call it the most important financial milestone of your life, but I don't. You can be broke with brains, broke with ambition, and broke with charm. None of it matters until you get that base capital. It is not about being smart, it is about being stubborn. The first one, $100,000, will take you years. The second $100,000 will take you half that. By the time you have $500,000, you will look back at the struggle for the first 100 and laugh if you still have the stomach for laughing. So yes, it is a grind, but you have to do it. Nobody can compound zero. People romanticize hard work. They think if they just clock enough hours, the universe will reward them. That is nonsense. If labor alone made you rich, coal miners would be billionaires. The truth is brutal. Wages are capped. Effort is not scalable, and time does not compound. You can work yourself to death and still have nothing to show for it when the paycheck stops coming. When I was coming up, I saw people who worked harder than me every single day. Factory men, bricklayers, clerks pulling double shifts. Some of them were smarter than me too. But they stayed broke because their sweat evaporated the moment it hit the floor. They never built capital. Capital doesn't get tired. Capital doesn't ask for weekends off. Capital doesn't come home drunk. It just sits there quietly multiplying if you don't screw it up. That is the divide nobody wants to admit. Until you have money working for you, you are just another beast of burden. If you are relying on raises, promotions, or job hopping to get rich, you are already on the losing side of the board. You can get a raise today, and tomorrow inflation steals it. You can land a fat salary, and taxes strip it down. You can hustle 3 jobs, and your body gives out before your bank account fills up. Labor can keep you alive. Labor can pay the rent, but labor will never compound. That is why the first $100,000 is a war of attrition. You are clawing your way out of the labor trap. You are stacking the first pile of chips that can actually earn their own keep. Once that pile exists, you cross a line. Suddenly, 10% isn't a rounding error. Suddenly, the market can pay you more in your sleep than your boss pays you in a week. I am not saying quit working. I am saying stop believing work alone is the ticket. The world is full of broke geniuses who never escape the wage treadmill. The only way out is capital. Cold, hard, accumulated capital. Until then, your labor isn't saving you. It's just keeping you tired. The market has a way of testing your patience before it rewards you. In the beginning, the numbers are insulting. You save $6,000 in a year, invest it, and maybe you get $600 back if things go well. $600. That is one busted air conditioner or a couple of dental bills. It is nothing life-changing, and that is why most people quit. They look at the puny returns and think, why bother? They would rather spend it on a new phone, a vacation, or a shiny car lease. At least then they feel something for their money. This is the trap. The small numbers feel meaningless, so people never let them grow into big numbers. They strangle compounding before it ever has a chance. I have watched people do it my whole life. They start saving, get bored, pull the money out, spend it, start again, and quit again. They never understand that the only way compounding works is if you let time do the heavy lifting. Nobody wants to wait. Nobody wants to grind through the years where the returns don't impress anyone, not even yourself. But here is the irony. Those boring years are the toll you pay to reach the magic of compounding. You can't skip them. You can't hack them. The numbers don't bend just because you are impatient. When I was young, I didn't see magic in the numbers either. My first investments barely moved the needle. I had bills, setbacks, and even disasters that wiped out months of progress. It felt like running in place. But the discipline of sticking with it, that is where the game turns. One year you notice your capital earned as much as you saved. The next year, it earned more than you saved. That is when people around you start asking how you got so lucky. It wasn't luck, it was endurance. The trick isn't brilliance. The trick is not quitting when the numbers are small. If you can survive the psychological pain of watching money crawl instead of sprint, you will get to see it fly. But almost nobody survives that part. They look at a few $100s of returns and decide it isn't worth the trouble. That is why they stay poor. Small numbers test your patience. Large numbers reward it. But you will never see the second if you can't stomach the first. The fastest way to stay poor is to raise your lifestyle every time you raise your income. And most people do exactly that. They get a raise, and the first thing they do is buy a bigger car, move into a bigger apartment, or book a vacation they couldn't afford last year. They call it rewarding themselves. I call it shooting yourself in the foot. You don't need a PhD in finance to understand this. If you spend everything you make, you will never build capital. If you keep inflating your lifestyle, you will never cross the line to that first $100,000. It is arithmetic, not philosophy. I have watched lawyers, doctors, and even executives fall into this trap. They earn six figures, but they live like royalty. They lease the German car, buy the house with more rooms than they use, and send their kids to schools they can barely afford. From the outside, they look successful. Inside, they are one paycheck away from panic. And here's the kicker. They feel entitled. They think, I've worked hard. I deserve this. Sure, you deserve it. You also deserve to stay broke if that is how you think. Wealth is built on discipline, not indulgence. I lived through the Great Depression. I saw men with fancy suits and nothing in the bank. You learn quickly that appearances don't compound, savings do. If you want the first $100,000, you cannot play the status game. Forget what the neighbors think. Forget what your colleagues drive. Forget impressing people you don't even like. The game is simple. Earn more than you spend, save the difference, and invest it. Do that long enough, and you will hit the milestone. Fail at it, and you will stay on the treadmill until you are old and bitter. People sabotage themselves because they confuse comfort with progress. They think living better means getting ahead. It doesn't. Real progress is invisible. It is the growing balance you don't touch. It is the compounding you don't interrupt. The car loses value the second you drive it off the lot. The dinner is gone in 2 hours. The vacation is a memory by next week. But the capital you stash away quietly works for you every day, whether you are awake, asleep, or dead. If you can't control your urge to consume, you will never have the discipline to invest. That is why most people never get their first $100,000. It isn't that they can't earn it. It is that they can't stop spending it. Here is the difference between you and the rich. They have capital, and you don't. Capital is leverage. It tilts the board in your favor. It doesn't complain, doesn't get sick, and doesn't demand a pension. It just compounds. take $100,000 at 10% return, it spits out $10,000 a year without you lifting a finger. That is almost $1,000 a month. The same as working some lousy part-time job, only you don't have to show up. Now, compare that with a poor guy still hustling. He saves a few hundred a month. Maybe he is on the treadmill, sweating to stash scraps. The investor with capital is collecting while he sleeps. That is what leverage looks like. Once you have capital, the rules change. Banks take your calls. Opportunities come your way. You can take a calculated risk without risking starvation. I saw this in my own life. When I had nothing, every mistake threatened to wipe me out. By the time I had capital, I could afford to be wrong now and then. And believe me, I was wrong plenty. The difference was I could recover. That is leverage. People underestimate this. They think money's just numbers in a bank. It isn't. It is freedom. It is a safety net. It is a battering ram that opens doors for you that will never open for the guy living paycheck to paycheck. You can buy stocks when they are cheap. You can hold them when everyone else is panicking. You can start a business without begging for loans. You can walk away from a bad boss because you aren't one rent payment away from disaster. That is what $100,000 means. It isn't just digits. It is the moment you stop being powerless. Don't misunderstand me. A 10% return on $100,000 won't make you rich immediately, but it is proof of concept. It shows you the game works. From there, everything compounds faster. Your returns, your confidence, and your ability to stomach risk. Until you have capital, you are just a laborer with dreams. Once you have it, you finally get a seat at the table. And in this world, the table is where the money is made. You don't need brilliance to get rich. You just need to avoid stupidity. But most people can't do it. They chase status with borrowed money. They load up credit cards, take out car loans, buy houses they can't afford, and then act shocked when they never have a dime left over. Debt is the opposite of compounding. Instead of money working for you, it works against you relentlessly, silently, every single day. I have seen people with decent salaries trapped for life because they couldn't stop being stupid with money. They refinanced their homes to buy toys. They ran up tabs dining out. They carried balances on credit cards, charging 20% interest while bragging about making 10% in the stock market. That isn't investing. That is self-delusion. The cost of stupidity is invisible at first. You don't feel the chains until they are tight. But by then, you have wasted the years when compounding could have been on your side. In 1973, I watched smart people lose fortunes because they bought stocks on margin. They borrowed to chase hot tips, thinking they were clever. When the market collapsed, their stupidity cost them everything. It didn't matter how much they believed in their stocks. Debt doesn't care about your optimism. Avoiding stupidity means saying no to things that glitter but rot. Easy credit, get-rich-quick schemes, and gambling dressed up as investing. You don't have to be a genius to sidestep these traps. You just have to be disciplined. The first one, $100,000, is already hard enough without digging yourself a hole. Don't sabotage yourself by handing compound interest to the bank instead of earning it yourself. It is amazing how simple this game really is. Spend less than you earn. Don't borrow for junk. Save and invest the difference. Stick with it. But simple doesn't mean easy, because human stupidity is a powerful force. If you want to know why most people never reach the milestone, look at their own behavior. It isn't bad luck. It is bad habits. And the bill for stupidity always comes due with interest. Everyone loves the idea of compounding. Nobody loves the reality of waiting. The first $100,000 isn't built in a month. It isn't built in a year. For most people, it takes a decade of grinding, saving, and not doing stupid things. That is why so few ever get there. They don't have the stomach for boredom. Discipline isn't glamorous. It looks like saying no to dinners out. It looks like driving the old car a few more years. It looks like passing up on the vacation you can technically afford because you know those dollars are soldiers that belong on the battlefield of compounding. People think discipline is some heroic trait. It isn't. It is doing the dull, obvious thing long enough to win. I learned this young. When everyone else was busy keeping up with the Joneses, I kept my head down and stacked capital. Did it feel fun? No. Did it look exciting? No. But the dull years are where the wealth was forged. The trick is not to break. Markets will fall. You will feel like a fool for saving when stocks drop 30%. You will be tempted to sell, to quit, to tell yourself it was all pointless. That is when discipline separates the rich from the rest. Anyone can save when the market is roaring. Anyone can invest when optimism is high. But when it all turns to ashes, and it will, you find out who has the backbone to keep going. I have seen people with every advantage, brains, connections, high salaries, blow themselves up because they couldn't endure the grind. They needed excitement. They needed to feel clever. So they chased schemes, gambled on fads, or quit when it hurt. Discipline was beneath them. Well, discipline is what gets you across the line. It isn't brains. It isn't luck. It isn't even hard work after a point. It is the sheer stubborn refusal to quit shoveling coal into the furnace while everyone else wanders off. You don't need to be brilliant. You just need to be relentless. The market eventually rewards endurance. It always has. So if you want that first $100,000, forget about brilliance. Forget about shortcuts. Just endure. Endure the boredom. Endure the setbacks. Endure the years when it feels like nothing is happening. Because the truth is, something is happening. Compounding just doesn't show itself until you have earned the right to see it. There is a moment in wealth building that feels almost supernatural. It is the day your capital earns more than you do. Until then, you have been dragging a rock uphill. Every dollar came from sweat. Every bit of progress came from self-denial. You saved, you endured, and you wondered if the pain was even worth it. Then one year you look at the numbers. Your investments quietly produce $10,000 or $20,000 more than you could save from your paycheck, and you realize you have crossed the line. That is when capital starts talking back. It whispers, "Relax, I'll carry more of the load now." That whisper is what changes your psychology forever. For the first time, you aren't just a laborer. You are a capitalist. Your dollars are employees, and unlike real employees, they don't complain, they don't strike, and they don't gossip in the break room. They just compound year after year without a single sick day. This is the point where the game flips. Saving feels less like sacrifice and more like feeding a machine that pays you back. Watching the balance grow becomes addictive. You want to contribute more, not less. It is also the point where outsiders start calling you lucky. They see your capital snowballing, but they miss the decade of grind that built the base. They didn't watch you eat cheap dinners and drive old cars while they burned money on nonsense. Luck has nothing to do with it. Discipline does. Once capital outpaces your labor, the wealth curve steepens. 100 becomes 2, 2 becomes 5. Eventually, the compounding dwarfs any raise you could beg from a boss. This is why the first $100,000 is everything. Without it, you never reach the tipping point. With it, the system finally tilts in your favor. But here is the warning. If you sabotage yourself after this point by pulling money out, chasing fads, or panicking in downturns, you can still blow it. Capital doesn't forgive stupidity any more than it forgives neglect. Handled properly, though, it becomes your silent partner for life. That is the reward for enduring the long climb. One day you wake up, and your money is doing more work than you ever could, and it never asks for a paycheck. Reaching $100,000 isn't the finish line, it is the starting gun. And plenty of people still find a way to blow it. The moment most folks get ahead, they start thinking they are geniuses. They forget how long it took to climb that hill, and they start sprinting downhill into stupidity. I have seen it over and over. Someone saves $100,000, and instead of letting it compound, they decide they are suddenly the next Warren Buffett. They chase hot stocks. They speculate with options. They fall for whatever shiny nonsense is being sold that week. And just like that, 10 years of discipline vanishes in one dumb gamble. Others sabotage themselves by rewarding their progress. they hit $100,000, then celebrate with a bigger mortgage, a fancier car, and vacations that burn through the very capital that was supposed to make them free. They confuse a milestone with a finish line, and they cash out before compounding can even show its teeth. There is also the problem of leverage. People think borrowing is a shortcut. It isn't. It is a time bomb. I have watched brilliant men go broke because they borrowed against their portfolio. Certain the market could only rise, then 1,987 hit, or 2,000, or 2008. The market always finds a way to humble the arrogant. The cruel truth is this: building the first $100,000 requires discipline. Keeping it requires humility. Growing it requires patience. Screw up any of those three, and you are back to zero. And don't kid yourself, going back to zero after tasting progress is worse than never having started. I have seen people crushed by it. They would rather live in denial than admit they burned a decade for nothing. That is why I always say, avoid stupidity first, brilliance second. You don't need to be clever to stay rich. You just need to not blow yourself up. The game doesn't get easier because you hit a milestone. The risks just change shape. If you think the rules don't apply to you after $100,000, the market will be happy to prove otherwise. Remember this: the climb to $100,000 is hell, but falling back below it is worse. Don't let arrogance push you off the ledge you just finished crawling up. The first $100,000 is a war. I have said it before and I will say it again, but it is the only war you have to fight. Nobody can compound zero. Nobody can rescue you from bad habits. Nobody can save you if you insist on living above your means. It isn't about brilliance. It isn't about secret formulas. It isn't about finding some guru to whisper magic in your ear. It is about discipline. Spend less than you earn. Save the difference. Invest it. Repeat until you cross the line. Simple, brutal, unforgiving. If you can't do that, no one can help you. If you can do it, you will unlock the only thing that separates the rich from the poor: capital that works harder than you ever could. People love to complicate money. They invent jargon, write books, and sell courses, all to distract you from the ugly truth. You need to endure years of boredom and self-denial before compounding shows up to bail you out. Most people won't. That is why most people stay broke. But if you have the backbone, the discipline, and just enough common sense to avoid the stupid mistakes, debt, envy, lifestyle creep, you can get there. And once you do, the game changes forever. Your money starts working. Your risk tolerance expands, opportunities open, and you stop being a powerless laborer begging for scraps. So here is the conclusion. Get the first $100,000 by any honest means necessary. Cut your expenses. Increase your income. Ignore what the neighbors think. Just get it. Because until you do, you aren't even in the game. And if you aren't spending less than you earn, I can't help you. Nobody can.